Fate the Winx Saga was Netflix's teen adaptation of the beloved children's property The Winx Club from Italian animation studio Rainbow. After 2 controversial seasons, the show was cancelled in a move that seemed to take even Rainbow by surprise. Since then, the property has been picked up by Mad Cave Studios' young adult imprint for 2 volumes of graphic novels, promising a resolution to the cliffhanger of Season 2 and hope for continuation of the franchise. In this video, we're going to be looking at the first of those 2 volumes to see what a hypothetical Season 3 may have looked like for Fate. Of note, a new creative team have taken over the project and have reportedly had no contact with the writers of the Netflix show. So let's see what they came up with in this extremely detailed review, beginning with a summary. We begin soon after the events of Season 2. A new school year has begun, but still no new headmistress has been appointed. Older students like Aisha and Flora are picking up the slack and supporting the faculty. Students badger them to hear news of the Fairy of the Dragonflame still disappeared in the Realm of Darkness, but Aisha resents it. Bloom, in her opinion, has abandoned them. Things are also taught between Kat and Terra, as their competing schedules prevent them from spending time together. Terra, for some reason, seems to unreasonably blame Kat for this, even though they are both students who don't get to pick their own schedules. Musa and Driven, on the other hand, have grown much closer since we last saw them, and Musa is much further along her specialist training now. Sky inevitably has taken Bloom's disappearance the hardest. Stella does her best to cheer him up, still a little flame for him in her heart. The Queen shows up at Alfea with an important announcement. To Stella's shock, Queen Luna is declaring her niece Neva her heir. The whole school is invited to the official ceremony. As Stella tries to describe her humiliation to her mother, an assault is launched on Alfea. Rabid animals are attacking the school, filled with new inexperienced students, commanded, seemingly, by a dark figure in the distance. The Solarian military take over the school and its defense, and strict rules are put in place. The girls decide that to overcome these new restrictions, they need to prove that the school is strong and united. They need someone to rally around. It is decided that Musa will enter the Realm of Darkness to search for Bloom. In the meantime, Stella, with her gift of visual manipulation, will disguise herself as the Fire Fairy to rally the student body. Word of Bloom's supposed return reaches far and wide, and Vanessa shows up at the school in search of her daughter. Meanwhile, in the Realm of Darkness, we see Bloom still trying to escape her tortured past. She has found out her mother, the ancient Queen Marian, is in fact Miss Dowling, and what's more, Beatrix, now a resident of this dark realm, is her sister. They are 2 of 3 who have power over life and death. Their eldest sister, Briar, still unknown to them, is the wielder of the Heart of the Manticore, the opposite and equal of the Dragon Flame. Musa, followed by Riven, discovers Bloom in the Realm of Darkness and begs for her to come back with them. Beatrix is desperate to return to the realm of the living, but Bloom feels she is happier where she is. It is up to the other girls to deal with things at Alfea. Kat is late to a meetup with Terra in the school woods, arriving seconds before disaster as another animal attack begins against the school. Stella, as Bloom, tries to organize the school's defenses, but a resentful Sky gets injured ignoring her commands. Nevertheless, the school's defense under Bloom is successful and the barrier is restored. Terra chooses this moment to break up with Kat for being late to their forest date, because her compulsory specialist class overran, something over which she has no control. The barrier may be up, but the dark creature controlling the animals is on the wrong side of it. As Stella takes a moment alone, she is ambushed. Back in the Realm of Darkness, Bloom is approached by a stranger who introduces himself as Lord Darkar. He is an ancient wizard, banished to this realm by King Oratel. He and his minions steal power through touch by possessing the host, and Darkar covets the Dragon Flame. Stella, possessed and still disguised as Bloom, summons Queen Luna to demand that she withdraw her army from Alfea. When the Queen refuses, she blinds her in a rage. But Stella is not done yet. She seeks out Sky for physical affection, and then baits Vanessa into wearing a revealing dress by glamoring her scars. It is the evening of the ceremony, and all assemble at the Palace of Solaria. Bloom takes to the stage, only to cruelly reveal Vanessa's scars to everyone. She makes it clear she has no intention of handing over the rule of Solaria to Niva Nedoria. She is the most powerful fairy after all, and anyone who challenges her authority should die. As she speaks, possessed animals flood the hall. Riven is struck by a venomous snake. Cat and Terra find each other in the fray and make up before they too succumb to the attack. The volume ends with Aisha and Flora revealing to Sky that person on stage is not Bloom, but Stella. Let's begin with the art style. When the cover was revealed, there was notable disappointment. I think it was generally not what people were expecting for the kind of series Fate was trying to be. The reason given for why the art had to be that way is that they did not have the rights to the likenesses of the actors. And I don't think this is true. I mean, for sure they didn't have the right to the likenesses. However, I don't think that would have prevented them from having a more realistic art style. I think they just contracted an artist, and this happens to be their style, which means that you do not get to load your frustrations in that regard onto Christiane. Personally, once I looked at some of Leonardo Goudreau's art, I actually became pretty excited. They have some really colourful, dreamy work, and I thought this boded well for a dreamy, ephemeral fairyland. Unfortunately, I was a little underwhelmed by the art in Dark Destiny itself. I just feel no joy in it. Fans thought that Fate was slowly correcting itself in Season 2 by putting in these little magical details, and that's what I had expected, to be honest. More colour, more magic, for it to feel like a different world. And surely it's a lot easier for a graphic novel to do that, and really have this distinct visual identity for the other world. To be fair, half the novel takes place in the realm of darkness, where the actually dead spirits are in grey and the living are in colour, but still, the lack of vision for the other world, both in the show and now in the graphic novel, is suffocating. Regretfully, I think the fandom might be partially responsible for this. I do wonder if because of the backlash to the cover looking juvenile, there was this pressure to tone it down into grimmer, more real, and frankly, boring colours. It's a shame because there are a few panels that are really pretty, and they still carry the tone, and I wish more of it looked like that. But let's take a look at what's happening to our main six, beginning with Flora, where there is the least to say. Whilst everyone else more or less gets their own plot, Flora is forgotten about and almost reduced to a background character in this story. Personally, I just think this is funny, and it is more reflective of how poorly this character was handled in the show. I've talked at length about that previously, so I'm not going to repeat myself. Of course, objectively it's weird not to carve out a place in the story for one of the main characters. And the end of Season 2 did put down something for the future of Flora, albeit not a plot point I was particularly looking forward to, but it was not picked up. Now, Aisha is an interesting case. I would argue that Aisha gets the only consistent characterization in Dark Destiny from show to graphic novel. It makes sense to me that she would be the one to feel like Bloom has abandoned them, even when Bloom's reasoning is kind of clear, because Aisha as a character is quite inflexible. Her upholding the authority of the office of headmistress, even when there is no one to occupy it, makes sense with what we've seen of her in the past. I think something to explore was the legacy of Grey's betrayal, her trying to square her feelings and her devastation, but none of that has been picked up yet. On a similar vein, Muse and Riven's development I don't think has been very satisfying. When we first see them, they already have this bantery dynamic, they're already very close, and Riven has this "that's my girl" energy over Musa, which is not the kind of thing we've come to expect from him. Obviously, if this was a real season, all of this would have felt fanservice-y, the actors could have carried it, but this is a transition to a different medium, so I think consistency was more important. It's hard to swallow that all this development happened off screen, and Riven is totally a girls' guy now, and all of it culminates in the scene at the end where I think he's dead. I don't know, maybe Olivia just wanted to give it its moment, but ultimately remove Riven from the story for reasons yet unknown. I'm not really enjoying Musa as a specialist, to be honest. Given the already bleak lack of magic in this world of Fate, it was frustrating to see a character willingly give up magic. And I do see how it makes sense for her, but it also dulls things down. In this boring elemental magic system, Musa's power was the most interesting with the most potential, and now it's totally squandered. I do appreciate the effort to introduce more interesting specialist equipment in the graphic novel though, so that may compensate, at least visually. That's another thing actually. Again, it's only volume 1, but where is the magic? There's a surprising lack of exploration of magic as a theme in this novel. Given that last season ended with several of the girls transforming, I would have thought that that would be one of the first things to explore. This new magic that they've unlocked, that they should be training. We no longer have the confines of a TV budget, so they can be flying around, transforming with outfits and everything. But it's barely acknowledged. Bloom is worshipped by the student body, but I would have thought that the other 3 should also have some kind of fame and acknowledgement for unlocking this ancient fairy magic. Also, I don't get it, don't you want to do that? Don't you want to design transformations and play around with the visuals? Moving on to Terra. Kat and Terra in Season 2 had this easy, smooth dynamic that was a reprieve amidst all the drama. I especially liked Kat's actor, she's very charismatic, and I was happy to see Terra happy as a character whose portrayal had been mean-spirited. That's all gone. The charisma, the ease, it's gone. The sum of Kat and Terra's relationship in Dark Destiny is they kiss, they argue, and they make up almost 3 times over within 100 pages. So, in interviews, Olivia mentions she really likes and relates to Terra, and gave her the relationship struggles that she has had to face in her relationship. I can appreciate how therapeutic that must be to be able to show the struggle of feeling ignored and not appreciated enough because your partner is busy and not dedicating time to your relationship, not making you and your time feel valued. However, I don't think this was a good plot to give to teenagers who are still in school and don't get to choose how they spend their time. It makes Terra come across as unreasonable and melodramatic, because the factors that go into why Kat is not able to spend time with Terra are demonstrated to be out of her control. I think they've taken an adult experience and tried to reflect it onto these characters, but it does not work for their specific circumstances. And I had to question the time dedicated to this, given how little time was given to other protagonists in this surprisingly short novel. At the same time, it hasn't actually developed the characters of Kat and Terra. We still know nothing about Kat. Please don't use this to criticize and speculate about the writer's personal life, which is not what I'm doing. I'm just questioning this as a plot point for school-aged people. Also, this is a blink and you'll miss it thing, but in Season 2 it became pretty obvious to me that having Emergency dropped Flora into the story after the whitewashing controversy, they were retconning Terra to be the Techna of this group, and transitioning her power set to minerals. Because that's what she used when trying to reboot Musa's powers, and also her wings looked like crystal shards. In Dark Destiny, she is using vines again, which is boring when there was stuff to explore with the idea of mineral magic. I also bring this up because in an interview with Wings Forever podcast, Quatera Briggs mentions that she wanted to bring Techna into the story, which again does not make sense to me given that I think that's what Terra was becoming. And interestingly, for once, Rainbow shot her pitch down. So Olivia suggests fans should petition Rainbow about getting Techna into the series. And I have to say, it is extremely galling to ask fans of the show to petition the original creators so that you have the rights to this character, and in the next breath, admit that you haven't watched the show that she's from. Because in this interview, Olivia admits that having taken this project on, she did not watch Winx Club. Her reasoning was that she really wanted to stick to the tone of Fate the Winx saga without distraction. I would swallow my contempt for this, had Olivia and Christiane treated Fate as its own thing and just worked within the things that Fate had already established. But no, that is not what has been done, and I ask, would you adapt a book without reading it? Would you adapt a show without watching it? As a positive, I think it was a fun little thing that Stella is being replaced as Air. I don't know if it's going to go further in that direction, but I hope it will, and I hope Neva will bring some Chimera energy. It was already a mistaken fate not to make the character of Luna into Countess Cassandra, given that the characters were first of all closer in personality, and secondly because of how much the actress looks like the character. So to play around with this Chimera Stella Cassandra dynamic in the graphic novel would be really fun. I love court intrigue, and I think this is one of the more exciting things they could have done with Stella and Luna's relationship, with Luna triangulating Stella with a third party. I don't know if this is going to get more development though, given that Luna has kind of been knocked out of her position of power in this abusive dynamic since Stella has blinded her. I'm kind of unclear on how much of Stella's actions as Bloom we can really ascribe to her. Stella still pining over Sky feels like a regression, but I'm willing to overlook it because I think it introduced interesting tension between her disguised as Bloom and Sky. I don't know how realised that potential was, perhaps there was more to explore there. Again, the novel is very short, and they have to tell a season's worth of storytelling within 2 volumes. It's a shame because actually Olivia has explained that the reason that Dark Destiny's release was delayed was because they had too small a print run initially. So clearly, Maverick underestimated the interest, and I think perhaps they could have also allowed for a longer novel. One thing I did not like at all, on top of one character blinding another, is what happens to Vanessa in this story. Her appearance in this story in the other world feels super random. She somehow suddenly shows up when the whole school is surrounded by rabid animals, and her whole function in the story is to be cruelly humiliated. I found it upsetting and wholly unnecessary. This did not need to happen. I don't even think the sequence of events makes sense, and it doesn't even represent anything in the relationship of Bloom with herself, with her parents, because this wasn't Bloom, this was Stella in disguise. I don't really understand this as a plot point. So, in terms of Bloom, I'd like to remind you that the last time we saw her, she was a wanted criminal. She had actually murdered someone. So I'm having trouble accepting Bloom's status as this messianic figure for the denizens of the otherworld. Why are all these students obsessed with her? Why is it the image of her that they rally around? Why do they even know that she has the dragon flame, something that hasn't really even been explained yet? On the other hand, I'm really excited by the lore introduced for Bloom and Beatrix. From season 1, I was getting this dark and light twins trope energy from the two of them, and I love that something like that is being explored, that they are actual sisters as was implied in season 1 and forgotten about in season 2. Although now it seems like the equal balancing weight for Bloom is actually this new sister, Briar, and the heart of the Manticore. I'm looking forward to learning more about that, although it does represent kind of a major retcon because last season Sebastian gave the names of Beatrix's 2 sisters, Isabel and Darcy. Clearly the Icy and Darcy to Beatrix's Stormy. But I am excited, I'm really curious about the lore of the Manticore Heart and of Briar. I have basically no idea what to think of Miss Dowling being Bloom's mother. I can't make it fit with previously established lore at all. On the one hand, I liked this character, I liked Miss Dowling, so I appreciate the effort for her to continue to participate in the story. I'm trying to be generous with this because I get the impression that they weren't allowed by Rainbow to add a lot of new characters or mess around anymore with original characters, so there was perhaps this need to build everything out of extant cast. But at the same time, Marion has already been established as a part of the Fate world, and we know what she looks like. It also, as well as not making sense within the lore, is not very good storytelling. Dark Destiny drops us in the middle of a lot of plot points I feel like it should have been exploring from the start. We should have been there with Bloom for the revelation that Miss Dowling is her mother and Beatrix is her sister. I feel like we've skipped a book or something. And the reason for that is that the goal of this volume was not only to give a continuation to the show, but also start a new arc that was accessible to people who had never seen the show. And I don't know if that was wise, because the creative team was first of all not given enough pages to present a new world and 6 main characters to a new audience, but at the same time the original primary audience was not properly prioritized, so it's kind of a lose-lose. Finally, this may feel like a nitpick, but as someone who lives in the UK, it was an obstacle to enjoyment. The way characters speak has become very inconsistent. On the one hand, they're all suddenly using a lot more Americanisms, talking about freshmen and sophomores. On the other hand, a character will occasionally say a string of British nonsense words it does not make sense for them to say based on their dialect or form of speech, like barmy or crikey or in it. They're just not speaking like real people, and given that these are characters we've met and heard in a different medium already, that was really sticking out for me. In conclusion, does Dark Destiny work as a Season 3, as a continuation of the Fate the Winx Saga TV show? At the moment, not so well. Lots of little inconsistencies, like Beatrix's sisters or Terra's powers or Flora's scars, are an obstacle to taking this seriously as a continuation. At the same time, the general problems of Fate itself persist, even ones that felt like they were self-correcting in Season 2. The otherworld remains confined and suffocating. There's a surprising lack of magic. Characters who have nothing to do with the original are presented for us as an adaptation. Relationship drama takes the center instead of friendships. There is also, and I don't want to be too mean, but a basic lack of creativity within the Fate brand that is perhaps a wider issue of the paranormal teen genre. The plot is basically a repetition of everything we have already seen. In Season 1, some creatures are attacking the school and Bloom is struggling against a mother figure. In Season 2, creatures are attacking the school, a villain is stealing magic and possessing people, and Bloom is struggling against a mother figure. And now in Dark Destiny, creatures are attacking the school, there is a villain who steals magic and possesses people, and both Bloom and Stella as Bloom are struggling against mother figures. Lord Darkar is a disappointment, both as a bastardization of an original character, but also as a villain type we have already seen in Fate. But as usual, I am here for the crumbs. I do want to see what happens to Beatrix, I want to meet Briar, I want to learn about the Manticore Heart, and also, whilst I don't know if it worked as a continuation of Season 2, I think they've taken the story to an interesting place, with Stella as a Bloom imposter responsible for all these things. So it's not without its attractions. Currently there are only 2 projected volumes, including this one. However, it is Quartero Briggs' wish for it to go on for more than that. If that is the case, then please go wild. Stop trying to mimic Fate so closely because it was extremely flawed and all that's been achieved is a replication of the problems it had and was even on the path to correcting. Can we just explore the other world, the 7 realms? Let's please leave the boring bounds of Althea for once and go wild with locations and lore. Fate the show had to be confined because of budgetary issues and COVID. Those limitations don't exist anymore. Please can we see the rest of the other world? I know the fandom has reacted poorly to this project, and the creative team were not expecting 13 years of frustration Wings fans have accumulated to now be focused on them. But I really think that the fandom can be won if there is proper expansion to the world of Fate, sincere adaptation of the planets and their cultures as realms, and a recentering of magic in the story. I think the potential for optimism for all of that, as much as I've whinged today, does exist in this volume. I would also like to say that whilst maybe I was a little harsh on Quartero Briggs in this review, I actually think her job is really cool and it was really fun to listen to her interviews and learn about her progression into this path. In short, I do respect her as a creative. I think there were some outside limitations on her work in this case, although I do think my criticisms stand. Ultimately, I have this weird relationship with Fate where I don't really like it, but I enjoy thinking about it. I've spent a lot of time contemplating how it could have gone differently, what a different vision could have achieved, so of course I'm inherently drawn by this project. It's an adaptation of an adaptation, and it's fun to deconstruct it. I hope that you had some fun too. If you'd like to see more about Fate, I have a bunch of videos on the topic. If you like the idea of Winx comics, I have a bunch on that too, and I am working on more. So I hope you will stick around for all of that, and I might see you next time. Bye!